So this next video on Blood Brothers covers page 48 onwards. We see the Lyons family about to move house. We see the farewell of Edward and Mrs. Johnston, and that section there. So the section begins with Mr. Lyons asking Edward, how would you like to move to another house? Edward replies, why, Daddy? Well, various reasons, really. Actually, Mummy's not been too well lately, and we thought a move perhaps further out to the country somewhere might... Do you think you'd like that? Now, again, if you think about the status of Mr. Lyons as a father, look at his hesitations. Well, the repeated use of fillers, actually, and then finally, might, ellipsis. You see how he is clearly so hesitant, so unused to spending any time with his son. Again, as we earlier said, Russell criticising the status of absent fathers, the damage of absent fathers in the upbringing of children, I think, in this way. Edward replies, I want to stay here. Mr. Lyons, well, you think about it, old chap. Edward leaves his home and goes to Johnston's door. He knocks at the door. Mrs. Lyons answers the door. Hello, Mrs. Johnston, how are you? Mrs. Johnston replies, you what? Edward says, I'm sorry, is there something wrong? Mrs. Johnston, no, I don't usually have kids inquiring about my health. I'm all right. And how are you, Master Lyons? Not much really, I think, probably to add for this section, other than, again, it's good evidence of Edward and his language that you can use in terms of his character. How are you? You could contrast it to Mrs. Johnston and her, you're what, which is an excellent response. But see how she tries to echo him, and how are you, Master Lyons? She's trying to, as it were, live up to him. What she wants to bond, if you like, she wants to be close to him. Edward replies, very well, thank you. Mrs. Johnston looks at Edward for a moment. Mrs. Johnston says, yeah, you look it. You look very well. Does your mother look after you? Edward, of course. Now, again, this might seem like friendly concern, but of course we can see how, with the benefit of dramatic irony, we can see how Mrs. Johnston is considering and caring for Edward because of the fact that he is in reality, her son. Mrs. Johnston says, now, listen, Eddie, I told you not to come around here again. Edward says, I'm sorry, I just wanted to see Mickey. And Mrs. Johnston says, no, it's best if... And of course, the hesitation here, we can see clearly how this is very painful for her to send her son away when it would be so easier for her to keep him close to her. And yet, of course, actually, she's trying to protect him. She's trying to do the right thing, even though it goes against all her instincts. Once again, then we get the sense of Mrs. Johnston as a kind of largely well-meaning victim here to this cruel society. One other final thing, when Mrs. Johnston has to ask, does your mother look after you? In her class, that's by no means always the case, and we see with evidence of Sammy and Donna Marie and the negligent nature of their being brought up. Donna Marie being left to look after Sammy, Sammy falling out of the window, and so on. It's by no means something to take for granted. Similarly, when Edward replies, of course, clearly in his class, somebody in the middle class, clearly being brought up in some measure of comfort and security is something that's much more to be taken for granted. So, we continue then on. What else then? Edward says, I won't be coming here again, ever. We're moving away to the country. Mrs. Johnston replies, lucky you. Now, I think it'd be easy to play that sarcastically, but of course, in reality, she too has this dream of escaping that we had explored in the previous video, this idea of escaping consequences, and the move to the country has been seen to symbolise the flight from the past, the flight from these actions that she has had, and the guilt that she feels. So I think she genuinely means it. Edward, of course, says, I'd much rather live here, with his sort of touching naivety, standing as he is, in the middle of this sort of working class sort of slum area. Mrs. Johnson, surprised, asks, "Would you? Where are you going?" Edward says, "Tomorrow." Mrs. Johnson, "Oh, so we really won't see you again, eh?" Edward shakes his head and begins to cry. Mrs. Johnson, "What's up?" Edward, through his tears, "I don't want to go. I want to stay here where my friends are, where Mickey is." Of course, further dramatic irony, the fact that Mickey is the person that he feels the closest to. The role of fate, they can be separated, they can be brought up in entirely different ways, and yet they still feel this bond. Mrs. Johnson says, "Come here." She takes him, cradles him, letting him cry. "No, listen, don't you be soft. You'll probably love it in your new house. You'll meet lots of new friends, and in no time at all you'll forget Mickey ever existed." Edward says, I won't, I'll never forget." And of course, there is again further dramatic irony. He'll never forget. It's the nature of their bond as lovers. And Mrs. Johnson doesn't believe that he'll forget it, of course, but at the same time, again, it's this sense of self-sacrifice. She's trying to protect them both. She continues then, comforting him, and says, Shush. Listen, Eddie. Here's you wanting to stay here, and here's me. I've been trying to get out for years. We're a right pair, aren't we, you and me?" Again, here is the irony. Edward, in his naivety, doesn't see the problem. Mrs. Johnson, in her guilt, trying to escape. Edward continues, "Why don't you, Mrs. Johnson? Why don't you buy a new house near us?" Again, naivety. Again, innocence. He's got no idea about the nature of her poverty. Mrs. Johnson said, "Just like that?" Yes. Hey. Edward says, "Yes." Mrs. Johnson said, "Would you like a picture of Mickey to take with you so you could remember him?" Edward replies, "Yes, please." She removes a locket from around her neck, and of course this locket will become significant later because it comes to symbolise the bond between them. It's a source of conflict later in Edward's life when he's at school, and it's a reminder of the bond that they have. Mrs. Johnson then says, "See, look, there's Mickey there. He was just a young kid when that was taken." Edward replies, "And is that you, Mrs. Johnson?" She nods. "Can I really have this?" "Yeah, but keep it a secret, eh, Eddie? Just our secret, between you and me." Edward smiled. "All right, Mrs. Johnson." He puts the locket round his neck. He looks at her a moment too long. And again, we have the sense then here, this sort of strange feeling, it goes beyond rationality. He can't possibly know who she is, and yet there is a sort of sense of this instinctive bond between them, as, in a sense, there is between Edward and Mickey. Mrs. Johnson continues, "What are you looking at?" Edward says, "I thought you didn't like me. I thought you weren't very nice." You see the evidence, obviously, of Mrs. Johnston's self-sacrifice, as we mentioned earlier, but he says, "But I think you're smashing." Mrs. Johnston, looking at him, says, "God help the girls when you start dancing." And of course, here, we have dancing not just in its escapist sense, but in the kind of wider sense, I suppose, associated with the kind of fun and sparse and that there, we continue then. Edward says, "Pardon?" Mrs. Johnson replies nothing and calls into the house. "Mickey, say goodbye to Eddie. He's moving." Mickey comes out of the house. Music is quietly introduced. Edward moves to Mickey and gives him a small parcel from his pocket. Mickey unwraps a toy gun. Now, again, significance, clearly, it's a toy gun, foreshadowing to the crime with Sammy, to the ending of the play, the casual attitude to violence, and the fact that all the way through they're associated with what I suppose becomes, in a sense, a motif of guns, linking to this theme of violence, linking to the theme of cinema. And I suppose it's ironic that something that comes from this idea to escape is in fact the thing which condemns them in the end when both boys are shot dead. It continues. The two boys clasp hands, visually symbolically. This is very important because it echoes the moment when they signed themselves as blood brothers earlier in the play. Mrs. Johnson and Mickey watch as Edward joins his parents dressed in outdoor clothes on their side of the stage. And that is the end of this video.